Want to introduce themselves?
Oh, Jill, I'll let you go this time.
Okay, I'm Jill Leinung. I am a member of the Valatia Library Board, but I'm also part of the contingent of the Mid-Hudson Library System Board of Trustees, which Janet is one and Mark Wilson is another. So I'm very happy to be here. And when I taught at DPS, I went by the library all the time. So all the time. So it's great to be able to meet all of you.
Well, this is a surprise. Very nice to meet you.
Yes.
Janet?
Yes, I'm Janet Schnitzer. I'm from Hudson, associated with the Hudson Area Association Library, and another one of the 3 representatives for Columbia County to the Mid-Hudson Library System Board of Trustees. So
terrific.
Nice to meet all of you.
All right. I think everybody's got their name on their window pane, as nearly as I can tell. So you'll just have to identify people by that as we go along.
Rick, there's a second Vicky that does not have a last name.
I think that's Bob Wills.
Oh, okay.
Bob is on the call. Okay.
Otherwise known as Wilsey.
Right. Okay. Very good. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our February meeting. Randy sent them out to you in advance and asked you to review them. So I'll entertain a motion for the minutes. All right, I'll move it. So second?
Second.
Oh.
All right, terrific. Are there any comments, corrections, questions about the minutes that Randy sent around?
Mm-mm.
All right, they're very well done, Randy. Thank you. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
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 Abstentions, opposed, and hearing none, we've adopted the minutes. Somebody we can't see, but has joined us tonight, Linda Romeo, is here, and the Nominating and Governance Committee is putting Linda forward as a new trustee. So we will work with her, and it'll be to fill an open term. So she'll come up again for election in the next, in December or a year from December. I'll work with Randy to figure out which slot she's going to take. So
Sounds great.
all right, so the Nominating and Governance Committee puts Linda forward. Is there any further discussion?
Well, many of us know Linda because, hi, Linda, you were on the board for many years in the past, but does everybody know Linda? Does anybody need an introduction?
That's right. I thought of Linda as a known quantity. She's also continued to be active on the fundraising committee, post-board service. So, if anybody doesn't know Linda, speak now and we'll make the introduction. No, I think everybody knows her, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, all those in favor of adding Linda to the board, say aye.
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 All right, terrific. Any abstentions or opposition? And hearing none, Linda, you are unanimously a voting member of the Board of Trustees once again. Yay, thank you.
Yay!
Thank you for doing this. Okay. Vicki sent around the annual report. I have not read every single page of it yet. I'm plowing through it. But she's going to give us a report on the annual report now. So, Vicki, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rick. No, we cannot hear you, Linda. I don't know. Right.
Oh.
Why, but. Okay.
Huh.
All right, I'm gonna
Oh, before I get into the annual report, which I did send a copy to everybody, so you can look at that at your leisure. And let me see, I'd like to ask that we take the mask mandate off. Recommend that we could do that if that was all right. You can hear me. So I don't know if that's on the agenda for later, Randy, or
It's after your annual report.
Okay.
Report.
Okay. The clerk position is still open. We had a couple good candidates, but it didn't work out. I also sent around again that job description. So I am filling in, doing that clerk job and then coming in at other times to do my own work. One casualty of the lack of the staffing is that we're not able to continue at the Ichabod Crane Central School, taking services in there. So that started this month, not being both Valatia and Kinderhook are going in. I'm continuing to work with Diana just to remove some obstacles, to have her continue to work on the publicity remotely for a shorter amount of time. I wanted to talk or mention, I'm just throwing these things out, that ELIC, is that now L&L, Live and Learn? Or when you guys vote on it, it'll be then the Live and Learn, right?
Yeah, I think we're doing that on the agenda tonight.
Okay.
No. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, our plan when we took over the ELIC was to have that divided between Diana and I, to have her have a couple hours that were going to be devoted to that too. That is not going to be possible to happen. So I'm not sure where that leaves us with the ELIC. We're just going to keep going forward. And the Turning Outward cohort will start tomorrow morning for the long range strategic plan. So that is my report. And now I'm going to go into the annual report. I'm going to share my screen. Whoops. Are you able to see me?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. How's that? All right. Welcome to the 2021 annual report on the state of the North Chatham Free Library. Thanks for taking this time to learn about your library. I am Vicki Wills, the director of the library. Some good news, and there will be some more coming. Although 2021 was the second year of the pandemic and we operate with restrictions in place, the number of patrons increased by 6%. We now have 813 patrons. 133 of these are non-residents. We continue to serve our hamlet, even if patrons live across the border in Rensselaer County. Our service population is set for the Division of Library Development based on current census numbers in the geographic area which we are chartered to serve. Currently, that number is 997. In a minute, we'll look at it quickly at a map of our service area. We are open 24 hours per week and 6 days. I'd like to take a minute and answer 3 questions, which I am often asked. How is the library funded? Why is it a free library? And how are we staffed? How is the library funded? We are a public library. We receive funding from 4 major sources: the town of Chatham, Columbia County Board of Supervisors, a small amount from New York State through the Mid-Hudson Library System, and a large amount, 20%, comes directly from our donors and those who support our fundraisers, such as the annual appeal. We receive no federal funds directly, but we do benefit from some supported initiatives, such as access to online databases, including Novell New York, which is which includes the online Encyclopedia Britannica. Why are we called a free library? The term free library refers to a library being available to everyone as a free general use. Early on, libraries were limited by subscription and social division. And thirdly, how is the library staffed? In 2021, the library had a budgeted staff equal to just less than one full-time person. This is broken down to a half-time director, a quarter-time publicity clerk, and a 0.15, meaning 7 hours, of purchasing position. Volunteers are an essential part of running our library. My thanks go to everyone who gives of themselves. Thanks to Cindy Lanford, Susan Smith, Brian Sadowski, Barbara Campbell, and Dottie Cummings. Thank you. This library would not be going without your help. Welcome to 2021. And
oh, I had to show the little library. This is the original library. And this was used when we first set up as a library. We were chartered in 1915. This is now open to the public for scheduled meetings or to be dropped in for study time. This is the map of our service area, which I just thought, since we're doing a 414 and some other things, we should go over. This shows the boundaries of the villages of towns. North Chatham Free Library is right up here at the top, right under Route 203. Valatia and Kinderhook are to the south, and Valatia's range includes Niverville, right about here, at which point the North Chatham Library geographic area begins. If you look closely at this dotted line that goes right through Kinderhook Lake, this is the town of Kinderhook boundary. North Chatham exists to the east of that. And we continue on over until we get to the town of New Lebanon. So this is our area. Villages included are Old Chatham, Rayville, Riders Mills, Malden Bridge, and a part of Brainerd. The school districts in our area include parts of Ichabod Crane and New Lebanon. I want you just to look at this for 1 second. I want you to see and get a feel for how the changing demographics affect all libraries. Notice the varying degrees of red. Red is the strength, negative strength, of the loss of library checkouts. Green indicates a positive. This shows all the libraries in the Mid-Hudson library system. You'll look down a little further at this. We're going to see the 5 counties. You can see Columbia, we have 30%. Overall, it'll be 35%. This is over the last 3 years, so 2019 to 2021. This has physical items going out of the library. Break this down a little bit further. This is the 12 libraries of Columbia County. Livingston is the smallest library and has been able to remain almost constant in its physical checkouts. Digital resources. As physical items have gone down in use, e-resources, also called digital resources, have increased. Between 2019 and 2021, digital resources have increased. Use has increased by about 36%. We have added some new services to go with this trend, from Hoopla in 2021 to Canopy, which we started at the end of 2020, These are a cost per circ, which means that we pay only for what our patrons use. And I thought that you would find it interesting if you got one, if I showed you one of them. So this is adult fiction and adult nonfiction. And the next two big groups, black and a little orange, are juvenile fiction and nonfiction. The large majority of this is all for ebooks. Holdings, 3-year trends. This is the books that we're talking about that are in the library. Over the years, you'd expect that this number of items in the library would stay approximately the same. And it does. Really, we have only so much shelf space. With the addition of ebooks in the last 3 years, our grand total down here is increased by 26%. So you can see electronic books is making this big number jump up. 2020 saw a reduction in books because of our suppliers were closed for part of that year. Circulation of reading material. What categories of items are checked out? And I think it speaks for itself. The jump in 2021, you're going to see right here, is again because of the increase in ebooks. All this information will be available on the website, so you can look at it in more depth. Let's look at the additions to our collection and the costs involved. So this is how we spent our money and what we got for it in the last 3 years. You will see this is quite a large number for the amount of items that we have. And the reason for that is this. This is just a breakdown of The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, a fairly new book. So a hardcover book costs $23.99, paperback $13.49. You go down to buying an ebook, $77. And 26.
Ooh.
That's it. This is, yeah, thank you. $20 for, if you're going to just check it out for 26 checkouts. It's a decision. You don't really know, no one knows if that book is going to be worth spending $77 on. Now, I can get it on the Kindle for $11 or $12, but okay. The difference between buying a hardcover book and an ebook, forever ebook, is $53.23. Now, of course, a library is more than just books. Programming and events are a large part of what we do, bringing people together. This is an overall look at the attendance of all meetings and events. 3/4 of our attendance is from programs. About 1/3 of our attendance down here is from committee meetings. And then we have another fundraiser. We are a busy place. Arts and culture. Last year had 260 attendees. I'm gonna look at that again in a second. The ELIC had 14 programs. Jenny, here was a collaboration between the summer program. The Loom Knitters was actually one program, but Balance and Straining was 2 weeks he did it. So. I want to show you this. This is something to celebrate also. These are both the arts and culture programs and the ELIC programs. The 8 programs here, the 14 programs here. This row here is showing you how many times it was viewed on our YouTube station. So arts and culture had 126 total views of everything. Elizabeth Zunan, which was a poorly attended, it was a wonderful wonderful performance, learning, and it received more views on the YouTube than it did in person. Price of Freedom, 68. We had one ELIC program for 15, so there's 141 views. Our YouTube channel at this point has 466 views since we started it. Fun fact, Red Riding was Rotten, read by Kim, has had 152 views. And lastly, we'll show you the children's programming. This is a total, this was a children's program. So some of these are in two categories. Friday for Kids, we've had a lot of success with that. The Reading into School, we were able to touch a lot of children that way. And the summer program, Jenny Brickmeyer and the Little Library That Moved was very good. And Robinson's Wildlife is, again, is just something that people love. Kids programming accounts for 609 attendees. Thank you. This will end up on our webpage. And if you have anything, I think that I'd rather you called me rather than that we do discussion now. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Vicki. A lot of work.
Yeah. Thank you. And the data is so interesting. I'm very impressed with how many kids attended.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if Kim's reading got that many views, I'm wondering if we should be reading, you know, a bit more, taping kids' stories.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to read some too.
Great.
Thank you, Vicki. That was, you know, obviously quite a bit of work on your part. And it really showed through in your presentation. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Vicki or other comments?
I have a question. Do you have an adopt a book program where patrons can adopt a book and have first read at it? We do that at the Hudson Library. It's $15 a book, and they get a book plate put inside the book, and they get first crack at reading it. And there's great competition among the adoptees because there are a number of people who like the same authors. So they sort of fight to see who gets to the list first. But it's a way of increasing our book, our hardcover book collection. So it's just a thought.
Thank you. It's a good idea.
It's a very interesting idea.
Yeah.
Very easy. And I'm sure Emily would be very helpful in telling you how it's set up in Hudson. It started when I was president of the board back in the late 2000s. So I feel very close to it. Because we started it then, and it's been very popular over all those years.
I like it.
That's great.
We'll pick up on that. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Vicki has asked that the board remove the mask policy from the library at this point. I took a look at the numbers for Columbia County, and they're not very high compared to what they were. And we're also considered in a safe zone at this point. So I'm comfortable with it. I don't know that it takes a resolution from the board, but rather a sense of the board, I think will do. So I don't believe we put the policy. Did we put the policy in place with a resolution? Anybody remember? Randy?
Can I ask two things?
Yep.
One, Rick, you're coming and going. Whatever you're using as a mic is intermittent or it's a distance issue or something? And two, is there a way we could set it up with a, like a trigger to bring it back if the county's rate crosses a certain percentage or something? Just so we're a little flexible on this.
You know, I hadn't considered that, but it's a very good idea. I'll have to go onto the county health department website and see what rating system they're using, if it's color coded or what. I seem to remember seeing emails from Columbia County that are color coded. So why don't I offer that? Why don't I offer that we will remove the mask policy with the sense of the board, but it will go back into place if Columbia County goes back into a high category. You know, I think I'm going to have to do this by email, folks. I'm going to have to draft something up for you.
I'm comfortable with, in the short term, removing it. Personally, I would vote yes, and we can readdress this. We can address it sooner if another Omicron shows up tomorrow. How do you feel about that? Because the issue right now, yes, definitely the county is at low.
Yeah. So why don't we say tonight that we're removing the mask policy, but that we will develop a mechanism for reinstating it if necessary. Mm-hmm. Is the board comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So then, Vicki, the mask policy is changed. Okay, terrific. Let's see if I can get the agenda back here.
Question, right. Vicki, will you put a sign on the door that just says, you know, what do they say now? Masks.
Optional.
Optional.
Something. Yeah.
I think a notice on the door that people inside are not wearing masks is a good idea. So something to the effects of, by the way, I believe the policy that we instituted and that we did vote on, so maybe this should get a resolution at the next meeting, was that we also wanted people vaccinated. So, you know, this change tonight could be no mask necessary if vaccinated.
Vaccination was only for staff and volunteers.
Oh, right.
That was our policy? Okay.
Yes, not for visitors.
All right. So we'll stick with the sign that says masks are optional. Just so that somebody would have it coming through the door has a heads up that they're about to likely run into somebody without masks.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All right. So look for an email from me regarding the trigger to reinstate the mask policy. Okay. All right. Next on the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Judy Albert. She's got the turning out program as the first bullet, and then a number of resolutions that we actually need to read and vote on. So, Judy, the floor is yours.
We can't hear you.
You're still muted, Judy.
Yep. No, I thought I was screaming loud enough. It's been a hard day. The turning out program, for those who are new, is
sorry, if I might interrupt, we also have to approve the annual report before we leave the library directors. So anyone want to make a motion on that?
I haven't. I move we approve the annual report, having had the privilege of reading every page of it. Just saying.
Has it been seconded? I'll second it.
Great, thanks, Kim. Any questions or observations? No.
Thank you, Vicki.
Hearing none,
Thank you again.
All in favor of approving that motion that Judy made?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Okey doke. Moving right along. Turning out is actually not part of the 414 campaign, but it's very closely linked. If you read the minutes from the last meeting, there's a description of it. Essentially, it's going out to the community, having conversations with the community, so we can use that information both for purposes of the long-term, the strategic plan, which will be developed in 2022, but also it's going to serve to get the library a little more visible in the community, and therefore it's good publicity and relationship building in the context of the 414 initiative. Further revised tax cap. Okay, what we have established a committee. We call it the 414 committee. We meet bi-weekly. We're kind of making progress on that. Essentially, the process is we have to have a petition on the ballot in November. And so the first step in that is to get volunteers on board to do the petition drive. So we get 300 signatures, that's a good 20% more than what we actually need. So we can get on the ballot in November. That drive is going to start April 1st. We'll run through May 31st. If we have any volunteers, you have to be a registered Chatham voter to participate, actually get people to sign a petition. You do not have to be a registered voter to drive people around or otherwise help us with the campaign. We will be doing a presentation to the town board. The 414 initiative goes on the ballot as a referendum, but it's the taxpayers who vote. This is not a question that the town council has any authority over, yay or nay. That said, it's good neighborly practice in politics to let the town council know what we're doing. So we're currently looking at doing a presentation in one of their May meetings. You may ask, why are we waiting till May? That's because the tax rolls are still tentative and not public. Everyone who's a resident of the town of Chatham has gotten a reassessment notice, but there's a lot of jiggling going on right now. And so I spoke 2 days ago with the director of real property tax assessments in Hudson. And she said, we can't get the actual tentative roll, and PS, people will still be appealing from that, but there will be a public roll published on May 1. So we will be going out to start the petition drive using numbers based on the old assessments, and we'll have to develop a script so our volunteers know how to explain that. And we're going to start in April, and then we'll meet with the town council.
God.
Excuse me? Sue, is that you? You might want to go on mute. We'll be meeting with the town council in May, at which point we will have actual numbers. And for the second half of the drive, we will have actual numbers. That's the process here. Once we have all the petition with the signatures, it gets submitted to the Board of Elections. It goes on to, it will be on the ballot in November. And we will, starting in August, really pull together our Get Out the Vote campaign. We need as much help as we can for all of this. We've got a great 414 committee, and everything is moving forward on schedule and I think very collegially and effectively. But we will need people to help both with the petition signing and then with the Get Out the Vote and thinking through the strategy for Get Out the Vote, as well as actually knocking on doors. So that's the backstop. At our last meeting, we approved in principle that we were going to go for $35,000. That involves, under New York state law, municipal taxes can't increase by more than 2%. So it's going to require a series of initiatives for us to adopt tonight. The first of those is what's called a tax cap override. Under New York state law, the limit on tax increases is 2%, because we're going to be going out with a 35,000 request over a base of 65,000. That's closer to 45, 50%. No, it's actually more than 50%. So we will need a tax cap override. So Randy has included in the agenda a resolution, whereas the adoption of the revised budget, which we are going to get to in a minute, but trust me, it's going to require it, may require a tax levy increase that exceeds the tax cap imposed by state law, the 2% tax cap. And whereas General Municipal Law Section 3C expressly permits the library board to override the tax levy by a resolution approved by a vote of 60% of the qualified board members, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the North Chatham Free Library are about to vote. So I want to put this, do we have a motion to approve overriding the tax cap?
No move. Oh.
I'll make a motion to approve overriding the tax cap.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we will amend this resolution to read that it was unanimously adopted by the Board of Trustees. Now, the second element, we're kind of jumping here. Are we ready, Rick, to actually talk about the revised budget?
You're muted.
You're on mute
Rick.
now.
We can't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can do that. The font is really small. All right, so here are the changes that we're putting into the revised budget. They're all, at this point, additions. And so I'll just walk you through them. And you're going to have a little sticker shock because we've never done this before. This is the first time that we're going to significantly run a deficit this year. And for those of you who don't remember, the budget that we have already approved was just shy of break even by $1,000 or less. So the additions that we're looking to move reserves for are for book at $500 a month for a bookkeeper, March to December, $25 per hour, 5 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, for a total of $5,000.
A total of $5,000 for a bookkeeper?
For the year. Yeah, March through December, Judy.
This is additional work. We have another bookkeeper that does our just general books. This is additional stuff that the treasurer was doing.
No,
correct.
Yeah, so yeah, okay. We had, right, Nancy Restafo was doing some, mostly payables. And we're keeping Nancy on in that role. So,
have we, Rick, confirmed that we have a new bookkeeper coming on at that rate for the balance of this year?
We do. Carol Barnhart has taken the position. She's already met with Nancy Restafo. The Finance Committee approved this. And then the XCOM gave it its seal of approval, as well as the Personnel Committee. So Carol Barnhart is meeting with Christy one night later this week. I just got confirmation of that today. So yes, so the answer to your question is we're going to spend the money we just moved, and we've got someone to spend it on. All right, the next increase we needed to make was for $2,100 to increase to $375 per month, or $4,500 annually, based on January's invoice received for monthly work on the website. We already had $2,400 budgeted, so now we're doubling the amount that we will be spending on the website. But we passed that budget in December, knowing we didn't have the data yet to know what this would be, and that this change would be forthcoming. The Finance Committee wants the board to add $3,000 to building maintenance for scraping and painting and fixing up the ramp. which desperately needs to happen. And we had been putting off doing that because we thought we were going to be forging ahead with the capital campaign and the renovations to the library. COVID waylaid us, and we just can't ignore the ramp anymore. It's it's to the point where it's going to start rotting away for lack of protection. All right, and then we also added $2,500 to landscape the DeAngelis property. We already had we're adding $2,500, and that gets us to the $4,000 estimate for Mark, because we must have had $1,500 in the what's the math on that? $4,000 is what it's going to total. We're moving $2,500 in to get there. So it was $1,500. It was budgeted at $1,500, which was a placeholder, and we knew this was coming too. And then the group also approved $2,500 to move Vicky's desk and office to the front of the library in the corner where it's ultimately going to end up anyway when we do the capital campaign and the building renovations. So that includes moving some bookcases, running of some wires, and Mark can actually talk, and Mark will probably undoubtedly talk about that in buildings and grounds when it comes up. Okay.
So I'd just like to add, having been in the library since it's been moved, it is a real improvement in the space because it's restored the sitting area near the window at the far end. It has removed all the wires that were jiggling all over the the interim period. And it gives Vicky, if not total privacy, at least a bit of privacy to get some of the work done that doesn't involve dealing with patrons. So I just from a personal user perspective, it looks like a good move to me.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a good start. Plus, quite honestly, that back window area is really the only open space in the library. Having it be used just made the library feel very cramped and things piled up on each other. So I think this is a very positive change. Okay, so Judy.
So shall I make a motion? Because I happen to have a resolution in front of me that I can read.
That would be perfect.
Whereas the Finance Committee of the North Chatham Free Library has recommended that the 2022 budget be revised to reflect the hiring of a bookkeeper and expenses associated with the upgrade maintenance to the website and certain capital expenditures. And therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees is about to take a vote. Do I have a second on this resolution?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? None. Unanimously carried.
Who made the second?
Everybody.
No.
You can put me down, Randy. Just put me down.
Thank you.
And the last one, and this is not even clear from the folks at Mid-Hudson whether we actually have to do this, but it seems appropriate. We talked at our last session about doing a 414. We knew we had to do the tax cap override and the budget revision first, but it seems appropriate since we are about to send minions out into the street as volunteers to get the 414 petition on the ballot, that it was an action which seemed to require approval by, recognition by the board that we are going to move forward with the 414 at the level that we discussed at our last session, which was $35,000 on top of our existing funding at $65,000. It would bring the total funding to $100,000. So this is really a resolution to move forward with organizing the petition to get us on the ballot. Do I have a second? I will make that motion. Does anyone have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried unanimously. Randy, back to you. I think I've done my bit.
I just wanted to make a comment because I'm also involved with the legislative committee for New York Library Association, and there are bills out there trying to reduce the number to go on with having a reduction in the number of signatures you need to get, that they'd like that to be extended. Okay. It was put in place that it was 25. They said school board, we are way out of whack with who we are and how we need to get signatures. And so they would like to make it permanent, or at least extend for another year, that we don't need to get the 300 signatures that you were talking about, that maybe it would just come down to 25.
That's terrific to know. Do you have any sense when they'd be considering that?
The Senate is considering it without, problems. It's the Assembly right now, I think. But it's definitely it's one of the big bills that we just, in Advocacy Day, last week, what we pushed with our legislators, that it was very, very important.
I think that would be fantastically helpful, because that makes, if that happens, then we definitely get on the ballot.
Right.
A part of our thinking, however, is the more people we can get to sign up front, the more people we have who are knowledgeable about this, invested in it. And it's sort of a precursor to get out the vote in the fall.
And this has been very helpful, because I know in Volusia Library, we're considering the same 414 also. So all of this, listening to what you have done is very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
That's great. I have a quick question, Judy, and that is, you talked about the turning outward, and we're going to start tomorrow with that. But I noticed that Casey Conlon said that we should have 5 to 6 members, and that it's required that we have a staff member, and that the library director be the lead in the turning outward. Has anybody talked to Vicki about this?
Yes, actually, there have been some conversations with Vicki. Vicki...
And that adds time to what you're doing. So I just wanted to make sure of that. Are you okay?
There's, there's no alternative. You can't let ELEC die. You can't let turning outward. We need to do it this way. I'm hoping that, Judy's got my back, and Casey told me I needed to be on it, and I'll be on it.
Okay. I hadn't heard anything, so I'll see you tomorrow on Zoom.
Yeah, no, it's a valuable exercise, and I'm actually going to apologize. I will actually be tuning in late because I have a conflict, but yeah. Together we will get this done.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Under the next agenda item, thank you for running that section, Judy. You did it very nicely. Next agenda item is the long range plan. And I'm not quite sure where you put this bullet here, Randy, but that's fine. We can, and Dottie and others are meeting, and Julie are meeting with the church to make arrangements to use their space for our programs, in light of the fact that we haven't been able to do our capital campaign and we just don't have ADA space available. So for programming. So that's under discussion. The library's asked for a bunch of information. We're going to pull it together the best as we can, and then we're going to ask them for a lot more flexibility than what they were indicating so far. And we'll see how that goes. But I did check to this bullet point. It will only cost us $50 a year to add them to our liability insurance. So it's certainly, and in that sense, it's certainly affordable to do this deal. Mm-hmm. All right, Finance Committee. Without a treasurer currently, we don't have a treasurer's report, but I did have Randy send around the budget so that everybody could see it in advance of the meeting. We're now just starting our third month, first quarter of the year. So we're still in the first quarter of the year, just 2/3 of the way through it, actually. And, everything is as to be expected and was budgeted. The only notes of interest from the Finance Committee is the changes that we just passed in that resolution. So it does mean that we very much need the 414 to pass, because some of these are structural expenses that we're paying for one time out of reserves and that we'll have to build into the operating budget going forward. So, you know, for the last 10 years or so, our budget's been about $100,000 or thereabout. It's going to be more like 115 or 120 next year. And that's before we even start discussing staff and budgeting for next year. So we need the 414 to pass, and we need Dale and the fundraising committee to keep working their magic. That's what I have from finance. Is there anything that hopefully I can answer from anybody?
Are you making any progress finding someone who wants to be a treasurer?
Not yet. I had a interesting conversation, you know, at the beginning of a conversation with Judy Matthews. I did ask Kristen Palacios if she was ready to come onto the board and take a role like that. And she said no, but maybe a year from now I should ask again. So the answer is I'm not bringing anybody forward yet, but I'm continuing to have discussions. Thanks. So if you have thoughts for me on this, they would be greatly appreciated. All right. Anything else for finance? All right. Terrific. So hopefully a month from now, we will have Carol Barnhart on with us giving a report as our finance manager. And better yet, maybe we'll even be introducing a new treasurer to be voted on. So we'll continue to work on both of those fronts. And but the news in the meantime is the library is doing just fine financially. All right, I'm going to turn it with, there's nothing else, I'm going to turn it over to Dale and the fundraising committee.
No new news for fundraising right now. We are in a little bit of a holding pattern for the next month or so. The next event will be the pig roast dinner in June. So we'll be ramping that up in the next month or so. And one just kind of quick note, several people have asked about Books and Blooms coming back this year. We didn't build that into the calendar for this year just because we didn't know where we were back in January. So it's on the agenda for 2023. Starting in June, we have fundraisers basically every other month through the end of the year. So we're pretty full for fundraisers now for 2022. But we'll look at bringing Books and Blooms back early next year.
Hey, Dale.
Yeah.
I think I might have mentioned this to you in passing, but let me do it a little more earnestly now. I think given the COVID numbers for Columbia County, the time is right to think about a cocktail party fundraiser in April. You know, end of April, maybe beginning of May. And so I throw that into the fundraising committee's lap.
Okay.
I think it'd be very well received. I think people are ready to get out and see each other again. And, you know, if the numbers continue to be good, I think it's doable.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think we can maybe evolve something we've done in the past, like Chase the Chill or some other sort of event like that into maybe more of a spring event. So we can take that on.
That's great. Also, Dale, just so you know, I've been in touch with Paul Harrington. I think I shared some of that with you. Mm-hmm. And he asked about Books and Blooms from the point of view of the church, but mentioned, you know, when we do have a fundraiser that involves community coming, they would like to open the clothing barn and maybe do something there. And it makes it, you know, more of a community North Chatham Day. And I think that's a great idea.
That's great. I think and it can only help both of us. So I think that's a great thing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And he wants publicity about events, you know, a month in advance.
And how do we kind of funnel that information? Do I connect directly with him, or whoever's chairing the event connect to him, or is it someone else? I wasn't quite sure how we...
I think your fundraising committee could decide, but I think in general, it's easier if you point one person to be the liaison with him.
So he is
on your committee, you know, and just knows that's my job. I've got to connect with Paul because we're doing it during the day, and it could be a community event.
So it is Paul. Paul is the contact.
Paul Harrington is
Okay,
the contact.
got it. Okay, great. No, we'll note that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for Dale or? Okay, going to keep the meeting moving right along. We're going to go to the marketing committee. You all see the bullets here on the agenda. Dottie's not with us that I can see to give a report. So the bullet points are the report. Okay, any questions? All right. Terrific. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, Buildings and Grounds. And Mark, maybe just touch, we moved a bunch of money and maybe you can just touch briefly on those things. You're muted still. All right, there you go.
Should we do the facility plan first? Because it's a bullet. Everyone should have sent to everyone, I believe, the facility plan. That's Mary and I put that together in the last year. It's something that it'll be a work in progress. It should be something we look at yearly and push things down the road, bring things up, and adjust as we go forward. And if there's any questions about it or any additions or things you might want to chat about, probably let's talk about that privately, I guess, with the length of this meeting. As you may have noticed with Vicky's screen, her desk is now moved, as Judy mentioned. We have yet to spend any money on it. That's the good news, but we still do need a shelf that will act as a privacy barrier for Vicky, and also because we're always up against not enough shelf area. We need more shelving, so it'll be a shelf privacy buffer. That's probably at this juncture the only thing we need to purchase. We're still trying to suss out what that is, the size, and whether we might build it or buy it. So nothing to say on that at this moment.
Does the lighting work? Mark?
The lighting, Vicky's lighting?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty good for her, certainly now. I mean, the overhead lights that are there are, they were supposed to be replaced 8 years ago, and we're still working with them, but they're fine. And she hasn't complained about it. So I'm hoping that we're pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, those lights are part of the renovation plan. So it will happen. But in the meantime, as long as, Vicky is not comatose from the fluorescent lights, I guess it'll have to suffice.
She has her own window now, so she has that now.
Oh, she has natural light. Yeah, beautiful.
So it's still a work in progress. We're still trying to figure out a few things. The good news is, as far as the infrastructure, it's a lot easier to get internet and wires and things like that to her where she is, because there's a full basement underneath it. So as far as building, it's a good spot to be in, and it is where we said we would move it on our grand build. So I'm happy that we kind of moved that along.
Good. Yeah.
Just one question, Mark, on the report. It said we hadn't yet received an energy assessment report back from NYSERDA. What's the status of that?
We have received that. I haven't had time to go over it yet. We'll be looking at that and seeing what we might recommend changing or adjusting as we move along. We've already made some significant adjustments to the thermostat and a nighttime setback that they recommended while we had our meetings. I've already enacted that. So we'll just see what else they are looking at us to do. I think that's it. That's it for me.
All right. So there is I put forward a motion. I move that we approve the capital improvement plan as presented. to you in the emails that Randy sent around earlier. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any questions or discussions on the document or the plan, the planning of the plan? And this, as you look at it, keep in mind that there's some hefty expenses in there that need to start being accounted for in our operating budget. We'll probably have to really start building up the building reserve. Now, when we do a capital campaign, we can build some of that into there as well. But in the meantime, we should start amortizing some of these things in our operating budget.
Good.
So that'll be part of the budget process this fall. All right. So any other discussion?
Can I just say thank you to Mark for all the work and hours and hours that we put in together to move this desk over here and run the new wires, and he's just wonderful to work with.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
I feel the same.
All righty. Julie?
Well, I submitted a written report to Randy, which is in the...
Did we actually vote on that?
No.
Oh, we didn't actually vote on it. Oops.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Good catch, Randy. Good catch. All right, the motion passes. And now Julie is telling us that we should have all read her report that she submitted and is built into tonight's agenda.
Yes, and also in addition to this, I guess I'll be sending the some of the posters and things to members of the board, and I'm hoping that you will help us spread the word. And I would just like to add, I'll put in a word. I'm hoping that Diana can be hired back soon to help Vicki with publicity, because publicizing these programs is a really important thing.
Yep. So Diana's back half-time at this point.
Oh, she is. So that's
working remotely. So it's the clerk position where advertising is for the other half of the budgeted time that would have gone to Diana.
okay.
All right. So that's the update on that.
Except that Diana's had, I'm sorry. Diana's had some problems, so she had to take some extra time also. But I'm hoping that we're working through all the obstacles and that she will continue to be here. She's, again, wonderful to work with. Yeah.
And in terms of my committee, things are going very well. But I hope board members will attend some of these programs.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of really good ones coming up.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. And ELIC is, the report on ELIC is, I'm going to make a motion to change the name of the program to Live and Learn right now. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second that one.
No further discussion? Is that what I'm hearing? No discussion? Nobody wants to discuss it again? Hearing none of nothing. I call the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes. The Live and Learn report is thus. Know Before You Grow is the next program. It's coming up on March 16th at 10 a.m. You have to pre-register in advance. I happen to know that the person from the Cornell Cooperative Extension who's doing this is extraordinarily knowledgeable and will be giving a very good presentation. She's good at what she does. So for those of you who like to get out in the yard in the spring, this would be a great program for you to go through. And the other thing is that the committee will have met the day before to set the rest of the programs for the rest of the year. And once that is done, then I can pick up the grant proposal writing for the Fund for Columbia County, which is due April 1st. So it's, it's a quick turnaround in 2 weeks, but it should be very doable. So, and that's on my plate at this point. And that is the Live and Learn report, everybody. All right. The executive committee doesn't have a report tonight. The only new business is the question has been raised about if we want to go back to in-person meetings. And this is just an open forum for a discussion on that. I'm not recommending one way or the other. I'm just putting the idea out there. Thoughts? Reactions?
Yeah.
Gut reactions?
I have some thoughts. So I don't see Dale. If he was on, he might have asked for maybe another month of meeting by Zoom because he and Joe are new fathers. So
how exciting.
Yes, getting you know, I think it might be easier for him to participate by Zoom if we could just do maybe another month.
Well, maybe we could do a hybrid, like I'm doing for knitting. You know, have the computer in the library hooked up to Zoom for those that need to Zoom in. I mean, is there a laptop available that could do Zoom?
We have a laptop.
You know, I think a hybrid is technically possible. The question is it? I've been through it with the town of Chatham's planning board. I found it less than satisfying because what happens is people turn away from the camera to face each other. They, there's a lot of that, and so it's hard to get the camera to get everybody all at the same time when you're meeting in person, especially if we're still socially distancing a little bit. So hybrid is possible, but in my opinion, awkward. So
I would vote to next month to continue with the Zoom and then see how it's going. Personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, Julie. I'd like another month of Zoom and see how things are going. Make sure it doesn't come back up again.
Yeah, I'd feel more comfortable as well doing it Zoom for another month.
Vicky's got her hand up.
I just have a question about the open meeting law, and if we're even, once the governor no longer extends that open meeting law, if we're even legal doing a Zoom. I like the Zoom. I think it's very efficient. But
I think there's a lot to be said for it, but you're right. As soon as the executive order is not renewed, we'll have no choice but to meet in person. So, but that's not the case yet.
I would at least encourage us to kind of track that, because this is an open meeting. You know, we have people today who are not members of the board, and we're happy to have them on board. We do post on the website when the meetings are going to be held, as do all the libraries in the area. Now that we actually have trimmed down the agenda a little bit, or made it more spiffy, there's something to be said for everybody having their little box on the screen. And I love you all, and I can't wait to get together for a cocktail in April. But I'm actually wondering if getting our business done can't be done as efficiently or more than in the Zoom environment, if we can do it, which is why I think we should really look into the open meeting law and see if that's a possibility. And then we can do it as long as people feel comfortable and prefer to do it.
Unless it changes, and I'm looking to Jill and Janet if they have more information, since you're tapped into, I think, the Columbia Library Association more than I am, but my understanding, and this was in our trustee training, we really have to be present in person when we have the open meetings law in place, because there's concern that people may be pressured into voting a certain way. If there's another person in the room putting the pressure on, the rest of us can't see that. I guess there was concerns about, the open meetings law applies to more than just the libraries. Other things where you could have backroom deals taking place, I suppose, if we're doing this by Zoom. None of us, I'm sure, are experiencing pressure to vote one way or another in terms of library stuff, but that's what our training in the trustees, you guys, does anyone else remember that?
Yeah. No, there's very good reasons for the open meeting law, but as long as the executive order is in place that allows us to meet by Zoom, it's our decision at this point. And I think before tonight, you know, it wasn't probably a very smart idea, but with the numbers down as low as they are now for a second month, it's a possibility. Right. So that's why I'm bringing it. It's not bringing it forward as a recommendation. It's just a possibility. And at this point, unless I'm hearing, unless somebody else wants to raise their hand and speak up, what I'm hearing is at least we should go another month on Zoom, pay attention to the executive order, which Mid-Hudson will notify us of like that, if it were to change. So let's just plan to meet by Zoom again at our April meeting. And we'll take it, and we will take it month by month. How's that sound?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sounds good.
All right.
You have to do it that way, so long as the executive order is in place, and it says that Zoom meetings can be held. That's fine. But if the executive order is lifted where you have to be in person, if you want to stay on Zoom, it has to be notified to the public where you are located in case somebody wants to come to your place during the meeting. So if you are at home, somebody could come to your house to view the meeting. So it can't be a hybrid. It's either all on Zoom, and then if it's lifted, it's all in person.
Okay.
Did I get that right, Jill? I think
that's how it stands now. Yes.
Yeah. But I would also say too that you need to make sure that there's a time limit as to putting your minutes on your website afterwards, and your agenda and everything like that. It needs to be there on your website. I think it's like, I forget what the time period is, but you need to make sure that's all published when you've done a Zoom meeting or any meeting now. I think.
Yeah, right.
That's a new requirement.
It's 2 weeks for the minutes after.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And what we do is we place a draft copy, and then after tonight's vote, put the final on.
Right.
24 hours for the agenda. We've been doing a generic agenda because only recently did we start. Well, not recently. I'd say in the past year, we've been trying to sort of pack our agenda with details to try to streamline the meetings.
Right.
But we put a generic agenda on within
great.
24 hours.
That's it. And it's hard to know, but Mid-Hudson will definitely let you know. I know that we have our meeting this Saturday, and it's on Zoom still. We've only had, actually, since I've been on the Mid-Hudson board, we've only had one in-person meeting that I've been able to attend.
And it was last summer.
It was last summer, yeah.
So are you saying that if we had a computer here with the Zoom meeting on it, that we could continue to meet on Zoom as long as there was a physical place and a computer set up for someone?
No. They're saying that they could come to any board member's house who's using Zoom because they wanted to see that person while the meeting was going on. I mean, that was a legal opinion that came out of some counsel's office.
The only way that could be eliminated is if that board member chooses to be a non-voting member at that meeting, and then they could just be there visibly, and it wouldn't have to be announced. But if you need all the votes, then you need to make sure that everybody is available.
Yeah. So at this point, unless the governor or the legislature does something very different,
right,
than what we've been living with so far, a hybrid is not going to be possible. Right. But I really am not privy to any insider info on this. I have no idea what the governor's considering. I have no idea what the legislature's considering on this, but they're both considering it. That I do know. So
yeah, one of these days, we're going to learn that that meetings will be in person again. Yeah.
My goodness. Rick, I know that you're eager to end the meeting so that we do it in a reasonable time. I think when we discuss meeting again in person in the library, I'll be interested to know if we can open windows if we are in the lower level, just to have more air circulation. Or do we need to meet upstairs just in a circle with chairs instead of tables? So that we can have open windows, if that still seems like a good idea. I know we've worked on having good circulation in the library, and we don't have to discuss it now because we're not going to do it next month, but it's something to add to the pot.
Yeah, so as we come up on making a decision, that'll be part of the thought process.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else? Anything, and not just about the board meetings, anything in general before I close the meeting? No?
I just want to thank Jill and Janet for joining. It's really been helpful to
Oh, it's a pleasure.
hear your input.
Thank you.
We're very glad to be able to attend. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Rick, if it was a surprise, but it was a last minute back and forth between the three of us to say, oh, we're having an annual meeting. Wouldn't it be great to come? So thank you very much for being so gracious and letting us come.
And it's always nice to meet other people in the and associated with libraries in the county. So hopefully we especially in person someday. Yeah.
And especially for me, because I know Valatia and North Chatham, we work together on certain things, and we have programs that are together. So I really appreciate being able to be here.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate your input.
Absolutely.
Helpful.
Oh, thank you.
And if you need help with the 414, Hudson has been, Hudson's very first 414 was in 1999. We lost by 2 votes.
Ooh.
Painful.
Remember that, people. Remember that.
I taught at Hudson High School, and when I walked into school the next morning, I was president of the board at the time, and when I walked into school the next morning, before I even got to the door, 5 people apologized to me for not voting the day before for the library.
Oof.
And we lost by 2 votes.
Woo.
So it's you've got to get everybody out.
And the other thing,
all those people who didn't vote felt it was a no-brainer. Who would vote against the library?
And it's also important where the position on the ballot is. I remember when we had 414s and it was on the back of the ballot, and I went in to vote, and I said, and you're not telling people to turn over the ballots to check for the votes. So it's always good to know where it's going to be.
Yeah, no, we'll be on the back. The front side is going to be full of candidates.
Yeah, well, you have to make sure that everybody knows to turn it over.
Yep.
We will be in touch with you for all those helpful hints.
Many of the poll workers are our friends, so we'll remind them to tell people to turn. One of them is shaking her head right now on this call.
Donuts are really good. We find bringing donuts is always a good thing.
We can tell you all the positives, but we can also tell you all the negatives to watch out for, all the traps. So be prepared.
Thank you.
All right, terrific. Thanks again.
Okay, nice to meet you all.
All right.
Nice to meet you. Good night.
A motion to close the meeting. Betsy makes the motion. Judy seconds it. All those in favor, wave your hands. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
Have a great evening.